That takes time, but that's okay, right? You think about it, if everybody was able in this church, was able to meet one person, right? And you convince that person to participate in church, and they came, and they stayed. And that's all you had to do, and then they did it. We could probably have our community center. Now, we're not doing things so we get a bigger church. We're not doing things so we can look like, oh, we're successful, because that's how we rate it, right? It's how big is your church, right? How many people you got, right? That's how they rate the success of a pastor. I personally rate the success of a pastor how obedient I am to God. Am I doing what he's asked me to do? The results, right, are up to him, but I also feel like he gives us free will, and they have the freedom to come here. I've had people come to church on a Sunday and meet me throughout the week, and they said, Pastor, you did a really good sermon. And I'm thinking to myself, I didn't see you. And I know my church isn't that big. And they said, I didn't say that to them, but they were talking about how good the sermon was, and they enjoyed the church. And I realized they stopped at Steve's Calvary up the street, or the Bethel or the Baptist one up the street. They didn't come across the highway to the country church, right? So, but that stuff happens. But keep in mind, last week I talked about, in the military, there's about 2 million people. That's active and reserve components, okay? But there's 16.5 million veterans in the United States. If we go to war with China, a lot of those veterans are going to be called back up. Some of them will volunteer. Some of them will be like, you're too old, right? But they're going to call those veterans up because they already know what it's like to be a soldier. They already have that experience. So these people that we're talking to have fallen away from the church for some reason, right? And they might ask you the question. You might ask them, why'd you stop coming, right? Now there's a multitude of reasons. Typically there's more than one, right? Okay, when I went through Special Forces selection, and everybody always asks me when they want to go to Special Forces, they even today, not like literally today or the last week, but within this time frame of my little world, they ask, so what's the key to making Special Forces selection? School for Advanced Suffering is what we call it. And honestly, it's don't quit. That's the key, right? And see, what happens a lot of times with Christians is they actually just quit, right? It's not because they truly got hurt, right? They wanted to get hurt. They wanted to find a reason. The enemy wanted to confuse them. I know when Teresa and I, when we first got saved, and we started going to church. Shortly after, God lifted his hand of protection, I think, a little bit. But man, I think we had our best fights on the way to church. I mean, they were good. Teresa's punching me. I'm hitting her. She kicks me. I mean, they were awesome fights, right? Yeah, it was kung fu in the car, man. I had to keep one hand on the wheel. Bam. But see, Satan doesn't want us to do things. Then when we got called, right? If you guys start actively doing stuff, don't be surprised if the enemy's like, wait a minute, you're feeling that seed, I gave up on you. When we got called to ministry, see, he can't tell the future. All he knew was like, wait a minute, this guy's a military guy, former Green Beret. He's actually not a sissy boy, girly man, which we produce today. All right? He'll poke you in the eye if he has to, all right? And then Satan kind of freaked out on us, and man, our life was miserable for about 4 years, honestly. Maybe 3 or somewhere around there, 3.5. I mean, I'd throw up every morning before I went to work. It was just horrible. But we just kept driving through. So if you step up for the Lord, don't be surprised that Satan wants to cause some chaos, right? And it doesn't have to cause chaos like you're going to fight. I mean, we didn't fight during this time, but man, we were distracted. You know what I mean? He might distract you by like, yesterday, her and I did manual labor. Boy, that's brutal. By 8:30, we're both like, let's sit down and relax and watch TV. So, all right. So anyways, I want you guys to keep this in mind. I gave you guys a piece of paper and a pen, right? If you don't have one, let us know. Romero will get you one. We'll be using that here in a little bit. I'm going to read through this first. You can go get it. And he told them, we'll go get it, many things in a parable, saying, a sower went out to sow. Right? What he's talking about is the farmer went out to plant the seeds. Right? And the one thing you got to remember, the farmer back then, they just threw as much as they could because they didn't know what was going to produce or not. I mean, they had an idea, but it wasn't like they do today where they have a tractor and all this stuff, right? They went out and threw as many as they could, all right? And as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and birds came and devoured them, right? So that's like a Christian, and we'll talk about these things in a little bit, but that's like the Christian that kind of comes in and, but just lets the world suck them up, right? I mean, I've seen people do that. They talk about God. In fact, I've seen it with Christians, at least what I think are Christians. The one thing, this is my belief. Not everybody believes me. Not everybody agrees with me, rather. But if you're not doing what God asked you to do in the Bible, the minimum, I wonder if you're really saved. Honestly. If you're not doing the minimum, what's the minimum? What do you think? Okay, that's a commandment to go out and tell the lost. But what's the minimum as an individual, would you say? What are some things that you would have to do? Die to yourself daily. What else? Love your neighbor. How about read the Bible? Right? Shouldn't you be reading the Bible? Shouldn't you be gathering together? Right? Shouldn't you be talking to God? We call it prayer. Right? These things are the minimum. If we're not able to do any of those, then I always wonder, are you really? I remember one time we had somebody that would attend our Bible study. So, by the way, you guys, we're doing our Bible study, and if we're doing the Chosen, it's actually kind of fun. I mean, not that it wasn't fun before, but I'm actually enjoying it. It's different. We watched the Chosen. We're in episode season 1, episode 2 this week. We watch it at the house, and then we talk about it. So if you guys are interested, come on out, talk with Teresa about it. But I remember one time we had somebody that would come to our Bible study all the time, and their fruit was just not looking like it was fully ripe. Does that make sense? They were struggling. And I remember praying to the Lord. I said, Lord, it says in the Bible for us to gather together. But what is the difference here then? Why is it different? And now keep in mind, a Sunday service morning doesn't mean it has to be on Sunday. You guys realize that, right? It could be on a Saturday night like the garden does, right? Sunday evening, which we've done in the past, right? Could be on a Wednesday. I remember one time I was in Spokane talking to my son, and he said, well, I work on the weekends. I said, well, just saw church says the new Sunday's Thursday or Wednesday, whatever it said on their sign, right? But the difference is when you gather together as a Bible study, we're really, what are we doing? Fellowship, right? Which is good. None of this is bad stuff. We're doing fellowship, and we're studying the scriptures, right? But when you come on a Sunday, honestly, your heart is prepared. When you wake up in the morning, right off the bat, you're preparing yourself to what? To worship Him, right? We worship Him through song, we worship Him through teaching, but our heart is geared towards worship. And really, that's what we're made to do anyways. We're made to worship Him. I mean, you guys know this to be true unless you've never, ever worshiped Him, right? I mean, the closest and the best, at least for me, I'll speak for my behalf, when I feel the closest and connected to God, and I feel like the best, right? The bestest, is when I'm worshiping Him, right? When I'm worshiping the Lord, and I can do that when I'm studying the scriptures and everything, but it's so much more grand on a Sunday morning. Even up here for me, you guys think I'm teaching you all, but I get taught half the time up here as well. And I don't mean like every other Sunday. I'm talking about half the time I'm up here. Heck, sometimes I don't even know what's going to come out of my mouth. Your stuff comes, and I'm like, don't go away, please. Holy Spirit, stay. You sound better than me. All right. We'll talk about each one of these as we go on. Other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up. And since they had no depth of soil, the sun scorched them, right? You guys ever meet anybody like that? They're on fire for Jesus. And then like a little while later, whatever that might be, all of a sudden it's like, what happened? You know? Other seeds. That's right. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. As you notice here, I got goat heads, right? I hate those things. I still hate them. Other seeds fell on good soil, producing grain. Some fell 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. So you got to remember, they were very much in tune with this. And I think even today, most of us, understand this, Even if you don't plant or garden, you understand that you put, seeds down to grow some fruit or vegetables, and some take better than others. Some don't take at all, right? And that's what they did. They just did as many as they could. He who has ears, let him hear. So what is he saying? Where did he talk about this at? How many people were participating in this conversation right now? Jesus was somewhere talking to a whole bunch of people, remember? Remember at this time he was talking to a whole bunch of people. Yeah. All right, somewhere on the hill, the mountain. Yes. Yeah, probably around 20,000, some people say, right? I mean, that's amazing alone. I like last week we showed the video, right? Because I always wondered, okay, you're out and you're talking to 5,000 people, right? I mean, heck, in this room we have 100 chairs. Some of you don't even hear me right now. All right? But Jesus, I'm thinking, man, how did he do that? And then the chosen, what they did is they put disciples out and would not translate, but repeat what he said. And I thought, I never thought of that before. Now, whether that's truly what happened, I kind of think probably did, actually, But he spoke to these 5,000 people, right? And later on, which we'll be covering that next week, he explains to them, all right? See, when we're teaching, this is funny, and I know I've told this before. Maybe some of you remembered, all right? I remember I was sitting in church one time, and the pastor's teaching this. And he taught it from a perspective, I was one of these seeds. I was either being eaten up by the birds, I was falling into thickles, right, thorns, or I got scorched by the sun. But I was one of those seeds. Maybe I had a 25% chance of being one of the good seeds, right? But he taught it from a perspective, and that's what we were out in the audience. So if there's 100 people in the church, that means 75 of them aren't real Christians, 25 of them, that's why the past scenario, right? He didn't say that, but I always wondered to myself, is like, I would think that probably all of us in here would be a safe assumption that we're Christians. We're all coming to church, right? Granted, this church is about 400. I'm sure that there was a safe assumption there was a small percentage that weren't truly, but the majority. So I was always confused on this. And see, this is where the Bible, you guys realize, answers itself almost always. Not always, but almost always it answers itself. Because later on, which we'll be talking again next week, the apostles say, hey, Jesus, what was this parable that you were talking about? We're confused, right? And he's basically saying, look, when you go out and spread my word, not everybody's going to receive it, right? So not everybody's going to receive it. But there are some people that will receive it for a short bit, and they'll all die out, right? Some of them will never come back. But some, I think, can, all right? Some people have fallen away, right? We're wanting to reach those ones that have fallen away from the church, whether they got hurt, whatever reason. Teresa and I shared this last week, but we got hurt in church. It was multiple things that happened, but the final thing is we're standing in the lobby, and pastor comes up to Teresa and I and says it out loud with a whole bunch of people in there. You guys are getting divorced. That was new to us, right? But even if it was true, we shared that with him. You don't share that with everybody, right? Then I confronted him about it later with the associate pastor there, and he denied it. He lied. He says, I didn't say that. And I'm thinking, what'd you hear? And he said, yeah, I heard the same thing I heard, right? And I'm thinking, so we left the church. But that's like, how many people here have gone out and eaten? Well, let's just use the American sandwich, the hamburger. How many people eat a hamburger at a restaurant somewhere? McDonald's counts, okay? Come on, you guys can participate. This is not that hard. You guys are like, I'm not admitting to eating out. All right. So how many people here have had a bad hamburger? A bad hamburger. One that did not taste good. Grace, do you eat hamburgers? Did you ever have a bad one? She's the only one that's not had a bad hamburger. But the rest of us, you don't stop eating hamburgers, do you? You go to a different restaurant. Teresa and I, we went to a restaurant. I won't say which one, mostly because I don't remember the name right now. We went to a restaurant, and it was not good at all. But we thought, well, we'll give it another chance. We gave it another chance. It still wasn't good. And then someone invited us to go with them to that same restaurant, and the third time it wasn't any good. So we don't go back to that restaurant. But we didn't stop eating food, right? All right? So if you're true, I believe if you're a true Christian and you go to a church and they make you upset, rightfully so, they were bad, you won't just fall away. You'll go find another one. And you'll be like, hey, I'm part of this one. And then they mess it up. And then you're like, well, hey, Adam and Eve messed it up, so I guess I'll give them grace. I'll go to another one. All right? Now, if you're one of those people that always find something wrong, then it's probably you, I mean, chances are, I can guarantee you, most of you found something wrong with me, and you're still here. So, all right? And if you haven't found anything wrong, you just don't know me well enough. All right? But you got to remember, these people are going the wrong way now at this point, right? They're going the wrong way, and we're there to what? Guide them back. How many people here have a family member that you know that they profess Christ, but they don't attend church or participate, right? I mean, right there, Can I tell that story, Darren, about what you told me about your relative that came to your house? Okay. So, this guy I know, now I put him on the spot. What is he going to say, no? Now I feel bad. This person he knows, he invites him to, this person he knows, he invites him to his house. Now, he called me up and asked me for advice. He invites this person to his house, but the person's not a believer. So they get to the house, and of course he's cursing up a storm, dropping GD words, and all this stuff, and he's upset. And I said, why was you upset? Because he's doing all this stuff. I said, did you invite him? Yeah. Did you know he wasn't a believer? Yeah. Did you know that he did all these things prior to coming to your house? Yeah. Okay, then why are you upset? Right? But see, the thing with it is he's going to show more light by not being upset. He's going to show more light saying, you know what? I love you anyways. And that's the way we got to be. It doesn't mean that I agree with lifestyles, right? I don't agree with all the lifestyles that, heck, I make half the time. So, let alone anybody else. But we need to work with them. Walk with them in their transformation. Okay, how many people here, prior to being saved, unless you're born saved, all right, prior to being saved, did stupid stuff? Grace was born saved. All right. So you did stupid stuff, all right? When I mean stupid, sinful stuff. Then you get saved, right? And all of a sudden the sinful stuff, the stupid stuff you did, starts to diminish, right? No, it's not like you had to concentrate on it. It's not like you're like, oh, I got to stop going to McDonald's. That's a sin, right? I gotta stop swearing. That's a sin. It just kind of does, right? Why? Because you're in love with Christ. You're in a true relationship, a worship relationship with Him, right? And when you're in that true relationship, stuff changes. Not because you had to. It just does. It's like when Teresa met me. She's changed for the better, but she's changed. He still go to McDonald's. You know, okay, I've used McDonald's, I think, since I've been in ministry. Eva bought me a Big Mac and put it in my car. I kind of was excited. Then I opened it up. It was empty. She ate it, probably. I was disappointed. I was, and sad. All right. It is the Lord who goes before you. Let's read that again. You're going to talk to somebody, right? If God's in control, okay, one of the things, I know I've done these demonstrations before, but if Teresa and I were fighting, right? Really fighting. She used to take my class, right? And she wouldn't hit me. She said, I don't want to hurt you. And I said, hit me. I had a guy that weighed 270. I mean, you can hit me. I'm fine. She said, no, I want to hurt you. As if she's Mike Tyson, right? So I punched her in the head. Right here in the forehead. Oh, she got mad. She pop, 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 pop. She was hitting me. But see, the whole time I was still in control, right? Just because God's in control, it doesn't mean that he doesn't let us do what we want to do. Does that make sense? And sometimes we need to get hit in the head in order to do what we need to do, or have a Darren wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go find a tabernacle for me. That's coming up. I'll talk about that in a little bit. We're going to be driving to California next week to find out about this tabernacle that we're getting to use. This guy, all right, $38,000. The guy says we get to use it. So we'll talk more about it because I want to make sure he's just not lonely and we drive up there and change his mind. All right, but anyways, we're down there, I guess, right? But God goes before you. So when you're going to these people, remember, God went there before you. Now God says, hey, I'm sending Dave to you. Now, they may not hear it like that, but they'll get it. And then they can reject it or receive it, right? And then when they come, and all of a sudden everything he's saying, they're real receptive to it. He's like, wow, that was easy. Well, it's because God went before you, right? You're not doing it on your own. Yes. They got to soak it in prayer. Be prayed up. Be prayed up, read up. There's something else I forgot. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. All right? Don't be afraid. How many of you guys are afraid to talk to somebody? Outstanding. She never had a bad hamburger. She's afraid. Now, can you lose your salvation by falling from grace? It tells us in Galatians, right? It's references that we can fall from grace. This is a passage warning us, all right? We can fall from grace. God's got a hold of us. He's not going to let us go. But, you know, if we're up here, who wants to be my assistant? You want to be my assistant? Oh. All right. So, he's not going to let me go. Grab a hold of me and don't let go. Don't let go, okay? And I'm like fighting him and fighting, then I can get away, right? I mean, if you fight God hard enough, he'll be like, all right, I'll let you go. Not because he wants to, but you want to. Thank you. You do have free will, right? But I think we have to work at it. And then the Holy Spirit exits you, which is God, right? You know, you think about it. We walk around today as Christians. First off, I don't want to get in the whole the woke side of everything, not because I'm afraid to. It's just my sermon will change, all right? But transgenderness, homosexuality, pedophilia. You guys heard about this stuff going on, right? All right? Yep, with the UN. All right? All this stuff that's going on. God doesn't like it. He allows it. We can sit there and say he doesn't allow it. He ain't strike them dead. They're still walking around the streets. They're doing whatever they do. You know, in Washington State, they just passed a law that if a child decides they want to get a sex change and the parents disagree, they'll take the child from the parent. Isn't this like, I mean, in my brain, I'm like, I don't understand. I don't understand, but they don't understand our view, right? But it doesn't mean it's right, correct? I got a little video coming up, and it's going to have some of this stuff in here. Some of these things, how churches even change a few things in order to accommodate.
While evangelicals remain an important demographic group for politicians, the percent of Americans who identify with any religion has been on the decline for decades. And a recent Pew Research Center study has found the biggest generational drop-off is with millennials, young adults born between 1981 and 1996. Kat Wise reports from Southern California on the young people who are changing their beliefs and the efforts by some faith communities to bring them back. And a note, the Pew Research Center is a NewsHour funder.
We're all together in this thing.
A Sunday service that is part therapy session,
Imagine how that would change the trajectory of your life.
part stand-up comedy routine,
I was this, and then I was this, and now I'm this. Give a little bit.
and part live concert.
Give a little bit of my life for you.
What's up, guys? How are you?
All followed by a round of beers with your pastor in a rented CrossFit gym. This is not your grandmother's idea of church.
We want everyone to be able to hear the good news, so we had something right in the back. Do you have good news?
Welcome to New Abbey, a Christian, LGBTQ affirming, progressive, family-friendly church in Pasadena, California.
God, we thank you all of the time
It was started 6 years ago in the living room of this guy.
for all of the ways that we don't believe that we're human enough or good enough. Or
Corey
okay
Marquez
enough,
is a
or loved enough,
34-year-old
or
ordained
that we're
pastor
the
who
sons
left a
and we're
larger
daughters.
evangelical congregation after he saw many of his own friends were no longer interested in attending church.
When you were talking to your friends about why they didn't go to church, what were you hearing from them?
This isn't relevant for me. Sexuality, that's a big one. Like the church is not honestly talking about sexuality.
You can ask my wife.
Sexuality is not a taboo topic here. Marquez's fellow pastor, Brittany Barron, speaks openly with the congregation about being a lesbian, and many of those who attend are from the LGBTQ community. The congregation has grown from 20 to 400 over the last several years.
It's less about form and more about content. That people want something that actually matters for their lives. So if the content is literally not healing you, connecting you to something bigger, then you're wasting your time.
New Abbey is one of a number of new religious organizations popping up across the country trying to appeal to young people who are increasingly leaving the religions of their ancestors. According to an October report from the Pew Research Center, 76% of the baby boomer generation describe themselves as Christians. In contrast, only half of millennials identify as Christians. 4 in 10 say they are religiously unaffiliated, and 1 in 10 identify with non-Christian faiths.
This is what interests me, like if people say they feel nothing.
Diane Winston is a professor of religion and media at the University of Southern California, who has been studying religious trends among young adults.
Many religions just don't feel relevant to a lot of these young people. They don't speak their language. And now there are other ways you can make those connections. You can make them online. You can make them at an interest group or an affinity group.
She also says many young people have lost trust in religious institutions.
There's scandals, the sexual improprieties, these problems of, pedophilia, of sexism, of misogyny. Why would you want to give your time and money to an institution that countenances or protects people who do these kind of things?
Some of those turned off by traditional religions continue to seek fulfillment in other ways. According to Pew, 3 in 10 adults ages 18 to 49 now identify as spiritual but not religious. One of those who has made the switch is Jason Perez. The 32-year-old from Los Angeles was raised Catholic and attended weekly services with his family. But he says he never felt truly connected to the church and left in his early 20s.
As a queer person, the Catholic Church is unsafe. I go to church and I'm immediately sinful. It's this feeling of not being able to show up fully myself.
Now he works as a healer at Mostly Angels, a store specializing in mystical services and products in Culver City. Perez says there's been a significant uptick in business over the last 3 to 5 years.
We're not sold on the old fantasy of what the church can provide you, what spirituality, structural spirituality can provide you.
While New Age practices and beliefs have been growing since the 1960s and 70s, the internet and social media have played a big role in the spread among younger generations. More than 60% of adults ages 18 to 49 have at least one New Age belief, according to Pew, and many are turning to new horoscope apps and online astrologers for guidance.
In the final moments of Shabbat,
But some favor much more intimate ways to spread the word.
in what ways do we take on the challenge of wrestling with our shadow?
At the Open Temple in Venice, California, Rabbi Lori Shapiro incorporates a variety of New Age practices, even a colorful bus, to reach new people in the community.
There are a lot of reasons why people have fallen away. I think the least of which is ideology. People are hungry for these ideas. We just need to make them accessible again.
But many faith leaders aren't rushing to change long-held practices and beliefs in order to keep young people in the pews.
The story goes on to tell that while he was teaching,
Reverend Mary Miner is the pastor of Brookins Kirkland Community Church in Los Angeles' Inglewood neighborhood. The church once had 10,000 members. Today, there are about 300, and many are older adults.
Do you feel, in an effort to reach younger people, that the church might need to change its views on certain issues, like gay marriage, for example?
I don't think the church needs to change that. My denomination does not believe in gay marriage. However, my denomination embraces those that are of the LGBTQ community.
According to Pew, Black millennials tend to be less religious than older Black adults, but they are considerably more religious than their peers. Reverend Miner says she's concerned about losing so many young people in her church and worries they are missing out on an important aspect of religion, community.
When you're not assembled with believers, then you feel like you're on an island all by yourself.
Paul's trying to do two very important things. First, he's trying to give you a new understanding of who God is.
Back at New Abbey, Pastor Corey Marquez says a sense of community is what's bringing people back Sunday after Sunday, and their approach isn't all that radical.
I've never opened a door in Christian tradition where I found that I was the first person there. There have always been people, monks and priests and nuns and theologians and philosophers who've been asking these questions for thousands of years.
Once the congregation finishes pondering life's most ancient and enduring questions, they get to celebrate with pizza and cold beverages. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Kat Wise in Pasadena, California.
You know, there's a lot of things in this video. You guys are like, no, right? You know, one of the things that stood out to me was they've compromised or they've changed in order to get people through the door. You notice that one church, could you imagine having a church of 10,000 and dropping to 300? I mean, that would be kind of unmotivating. You know what I mean? But the truth has to be taught. I'm not the arbitrator of the truth. I'm not the arbitrator of the universe. I'm not the person that gets to set the rules. You know, it's kind of like going back to the military. One of the things that I've noticed over time with the military is they've made it easier. You know, I remember like when I went to Ranger School in 1990, I'd go out of that and everybody would always joke was, oh, I went to the last hard class. There was actually one point where when it was actually becoming true, you know what I mean? It wasn't as hard as it was then. Same things I went through. It was much more physical demanding in the 70s, you know? I remember during World War II, when you went to airborne school, it was like Ranger School. It was like super hard. It's like going to Special Forces, you know? But see, over time, as they make it easier, right, they change things, Now women can be in combat, Imagine the woman that gets caught by the bad guy, right? They're not going to care that you're a woman. They're going to rape you. They'll rape you. They'll do all kinds of stuff to you. Same with a man, right? But I think there's certain roles that we have in society that we should do. I'm never going to have a baby. I don't care how hard I try. Not going to happen, right? That's not my role. The woman's role is to be nurturing. I'm to protect. You ever see a man get mad? Doesn't look like a woman, right? Right? And you get a woman that stands there like, if I get mad, Teresa immediately gets mad at me as if it's my fault that I got mad at them because what they did, because how I'm responding, because she would respond different, because she responds with love, gentleness, empathy, and I respond with courage. All right. But I'm not going to compromise. Now, the one thing that the pastor said, and I don't know what she meant by this, I did notice they cut it off because that's what news media does. You guys know I had an interview when I went to Iraq by, I think it was the New York Times, some big paper in New York, and I was interviewed for like an hour as a sniper. And as snipers, there's only a couple of us. We had 3-man teams when we were over there, but typically it's 2-man team. And you sneak around at night. Why? Well, there's only 2 of you, all right? And then you kind of want to get in position, and you want to shoot early in the morning or at dusk, preferably dusk, so I can leave, right? And they're like, oh, like a vampire. No. Anyways, this went on for about an hour, and finally towards the end, I'm like, whatever, sure. The whole article was about how I thought I was a vampire, and I was blood-hungry vampire. And I'm like, really? And I've had other interviews where they I don't care. They take it and cut it. I never understood this. If you sit there and say, like our church, right? If you live an alternative lifestyle, there's a whole bunch of things, LGBTQ. We're not going to condemn you in that transformation, right? We're going to walk with you. Well, I can go to the computer, and this has happened to me, not on this topic, as when I was in the Army, and they'll take out not, and they'll leave in condemn. And they won't say anything about transformation, according to their agenda. And then I called up the person that did the interview, and I said, you promised me this. And they said, well, I'm not the editor. I'll kill you. All right. So anyways, I don't do them anymore. If we change, can we reach the people? Don't need to compromise the Word of God. Correct. Look, and I know that, I want to say, if I'm talking with these things and I don't mention prayer, I want you to understand we need to pray ahead of time, okay? If I don't want you to be confused thinking that we just go do things without praying, okay? But God's still ahead of us, and He doesn't need me to be prayed up, read up, and all these other things. He just needs me to participate, but it is a lot better if I'm in tune with God, right? I know before I go into the jail, before you go into the jail, before you go in the jail, you guys are being prayed up, right? And all of a sudden you see stuff happen, okay? Don't get confused when we're talking up here that we don't participate in prayer, okay? All right, so the church will be more acceptable if we change. What do you think? Yes, they will be. We know that. But it doesn't mean the acceptance is right. It's kind of like, look, I'm going to go out and I'm going to stand like this and pray to God and actually the tree, because that's my God, that this lion's not going to eat me. And I know that tree's going to protect me, even if I have to climb it. No, you're still going to get eaten. All right? We don't change the message of God so we can fill the pews. Matter of fact, the more research I've been doing on this, if you're really preaching God's word, it seems to be diminishing, unless you want to make it entertaining, and then you watch these guys, and I question whether they're truly teaching God's word. You know, they're teaching prosperity. Yes, right there. You know, let's have some beers afterwards. Right? Let's have some pizzas. You know, here's the problem. When you look at the LGBTQ segment of our society, okay? Why does a man and a woman date? Because they fall in love, right? They like each other. They find each other attractive. Then they get married. Why do they marry? Because they're in love. But what's that love and all that stuff turn into is I'm going to have a family, all right? Even in Teresa and I's case, right? We still have a family even though our kids are from different spouses. It's still our family. But see, when you're of the same sex, you can't create a family. And I've been told, well, I can adopt. Well, if everybody was gay, nobody's adopting anybody because you ain't having any kids, right? But I can adopt. But it's still the primary objective of this demographics is sex. So my question when I was watching that video was, how many people in that room is having sex outside of marriage and it's okay? Probably not even talked about. Oh, yeah. You know, I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking about that too. Because they were saying, well, churches, they're bad. They got people that mess up, right? But universities got people that mess up all the time, but universities still have students, right? Our government messes up all the time. And I'm talking about like pastors, where they drink too much, they have infidelities, they do something wrong. See, the thing is you hold us at higher esteem as if you don't hold the politicians at higher esteem. Matter of fact, I think and typically think they got to have some garbage in order to be elected, right? But I don't think that analogy of that news reporter when they were talking about is true. I don't think people are leaving the church because the church is kind of messed up. I think they're leaving the church because they're not Christians. Yeah, but they're not Christians then. They're not Christians. You know, and it hurts to say that, but you know, hey, I was talking to a young person the other day and I was telling them about, they're in their 20s, late 20s, I was telling them about, man, I can't believe some of the stuff they're trying to push into this school, man. They got this one book, I don't know even the book right now, where it's explicit pictures of a male, adult male wanting to have intimate relations with a young boy and they have explicit pictures. And then they asked me, well, did you see the book? I'm like, well, a trustworthy person told me about the book. I ain't seen it. Well, then how do you know? They're questioning it. Rather than saying, oh, that's wrong, they're questioning if I seen the book. And then actually, it wasn't wrong that the book was there. It was just like, have you seen the pictures? Are they really that explicit? It doesn't make sense to me. You know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense. But see, that's when the enemy gets into the situation. And we start to listen to him. We start to change. Right? And we can always point to the 1960s when all this changed. They took prayer out of schools. They took the Bible out of schools. The sexual revolution started in the 60s, manifested in the 70s, right? We can always say that stuff. But the fact of it is Satan's been doing it for a long time. It's just coming home to us now. Right? This is not necessarily new in other parts of the world. So we'll go over the sower, right? Many people sow. They're throwing it everywhere. They're hoping that it scatters and some of it takes. So the apostles knew right off the bat what they're talking about. They didn't know that they were talking about them as the sowers, but they understood the concept, right? Because later on, they asked Jesus about, well, what was that parable about, right? Ancient worlds they sowed, and they threw as much as they could, which sprang up, right? They knew well enough to rotor the ground. They knew well enough to water it, but they threw as much as they could. And there has to be some relevance to the parable, is when I walked along the edge, right? And I'm throwing some here on the edge, that some fell on rocky ground. Some might even fell in the place that I tilled, but the weeds might have got into it, like in my yard, right? I got grass in the yard, but I got some weeds throughout different spots, you know. Some of them fell and the birds came up and ate them, right? And on the ground they prepared for the seeds. It has not been tilled or turned, and its surface is hard. Seeds merely lay on top of the path. It's not even, it hasn't even really started much, right? How many people here know somebody like that, where they've gone to church, they're professing Christians, but they truly have never given themselves to the Lord? How many people here know someone like that? Write their name down on that paper. You're not going to share this with me. This is for you. All right? Who do you know that has gone to church a few times, one time, whatever it is, a few times, but they're professing Christians, but they've actually never, ever said, God is my Savior. They've never been baptized. Right? Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil. And immediately they sprang up. Since they had no depth of soil, the sun rose and scorched them and withered them up. How many of you know someone like this that's been going to church, but yet they're withered up at this point? Put their name down on your paper. Somebody that you know, and it could be more than one. Don't just limit yourself to one friend, unless you only have one friend. Write down their name. Who do you know that was going to church for a little while, but no longer go? Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. But these people here are people that they come in and they get root and they get excited, right? They're excited. They're on fire for Jesus. And then you look at them a little while later. I've had a few of these people that I know, and it's like, what happened? It's like the world came in and gobbled them up, right? Who do you know like that? Write down their name. Yeah, well, I mean, just write down some note that, hey, it's the dude, I don't remember their name, but he was tall and good looking like me. I'm not tall. You notice I didn't say I wasn't good looking, though. All right. You know, they get overtaken by money. They get overtaken by work, careers, success. Whatever it is, they're overtaken by that, and they no longer... Write that name down. Now take a moment and think of anybody else that might fit any other category. Somehow I didn't fit. Just someone that you know that doesn't participate in church, but at one point they did. Write that name down. If you can keep these with you, all right, this will be used. Now next week I'm going to be talking about different strategies, I guess. I don't even know what I'm doing yet. But we're going to present up a strategy on some ways that you could do this and contact them, whatever it might be. Obviously, we're going to pray ahead of time. That was brought up twice today. And I don't mean to laugh or anything. It's not funny, but we're going to be praying, you're going to be reading, you're going to be relying on the Lord because he goes ahead of us, right? All right? But we also have to have help too. That's why we come to church, one of the things. So when we have questions, hey, what do you think of this, right? You know? So anybody else? But I have this against you, that you have abandoned the love you had first. Right? They've abandoned Jesus Christ. They fell in love with him, and then they've abandoned him. Okay? Remember, therefore, from where you have fallen, repent and do the works you did at first. So, I mean, these are some clues on how we can help out, right? You go to somebody and you're talking to them, and just, hey, just pick up where you left off. God's not going to care. He more cares about you coming back home than why you left. Right? He already knows it all anyways. If not, I will come to you and remove your lampstand from its place unless you repent. See, this is the urgency. These people that you're writing down are people that you know. This is the urgency. If they don't come back, God's going to let them on their own. You're on your own. And the sad part is, I bet you guys, a lot of you wrote down family members. Right? You wrote down family members. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. That's you guys. Blessed is the man who stays steadfast under trial. For when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. I had a video that I was going to play. I don't know. I'm going to let you guys vote on this one. I do have a video. It's only a couple minutes long. You guys want to watch it? All right. So I'll play it, and then the worship team can get up there afterwards, and we'll play some little song. All right?
You write, there are tens of millions of Americans who aren't on the hard left or the hard right who feel the world has gone mad. So in what ways has the world gone mad?
Well, when you have the chief reporter on the beat of COVID for the New York Times talking about how questioning or pursuing the question of the lab leak is racist, the world has gone mad. When you're not able to say out loud and in public that there are differences between men and women, the world has gone mad. When we're not allowed to acknowledge that rioting is rioting and it is bad, and that silence is not violence, but violence is violence, the world has gone mad. When we're not able to say that Hunter Biden's laptop is a story worth pursuing, the world has gone mad. When, in the name of progress, young school children, as young as kindergarten, are being separated in public schools because of their race, and that is called progress rather than segregation, the world has gone mad. There are dozens of examples that I could share with you and with your viewers.
And you say
everyone
aloud.
Sort of knows this, and
you say we're not allowed, we're not able.
Between...
Who's the people stopping the conversation? Who are they?
People that work at networks, frankly, like the one I'm speaking on right now, who try and claim that, it was racist to investigate the lab leak theory. It was. Let's just take an example.
But I'm just saying that when you say aloud, I just think it's a provocative thing you say. You say we're not allowed to talk about these things, but they're all over the internet. I can Google them. I can find them everywhere. I've heard about every story you mentioned. Of course. So I'm just suggesting, of course, people are allowed to cover whatever they want to cover.
But you and I both know, and it would be delusional to claim otherwise, that touching your finger to an increasing number of subjects that have been deemed third rail by the mainstream institutions and increasingly by some of the tech companies will lead to reputational damage, perhaps you losing your job, your children sometimes being demonized as well. And so what happens is a kind of internal self-censorship. This is something that I saw over and over again when I was at the New York Times.
We can get the worship team up there. It's funny because when they said, "Oh, you're not allowed," and then I realized I'm looking at the internet and I'm scrolling through different things, and you do see our side on there, but the thing of it is it's not as loud, right? And it's and who's speaking, is your voice heard or not? That's the other one, and it's I could sit there and say I don't agree with children having sex changes and being promoted, but that's all I got, and they're doing it. Do you know what I mean? There's a difference between us saying it and what the other side is executing it. One of the things, and not to, trying to think of a word that's not in my head currently. For you guys that are Republican, I don't want to make you mad, but they're not doing anything. I don't see it. I mean, when I vote, do I vote Republican? Almost always. Why? Because the other side's way gone. But all I ever see is them talk. I don't see one Republican actually do anything. Okay, if a Republican comes up and says, hey, we want this guy to be a president, what do? They take him to court for stuff that used to be non-felony, now it's a felony, right? That's Donald Trump. And I don't necessarily, we don't need that, please. Because I don't want it to be construed as a joke. It's not a joke, okay? You know, whether you support Trump or not, that's not the point, you know? When we got kids that are getting sex changes and being taken away from their parents because their parents doesn't agree with it, that's wrong. And see, here I'm in this position, what power do I have? I have to run for office, and then if I run for office, what happens? I don't know. But the strategy is to change the world, right? The strategy, they hit the big cities, now they're going to the rural areas. But see, the people that we elect, and I know this is politics, and maybe you're going to be mad at me for this, but honestly, I don't see the Republican doing anything but doing this. I see everything on the Democrat side. Maybe I don't agree with them, but at least they got oomph to do it. They're executing what they do it. I don't agree with it, but these guys, all I ever see is them talk. So I hope a Republican sees this. If you see this, yes, it's me. I live in Kennewick, Washington. You can come find me and harass me. I don't care, but you're all cowards. All right? Yeah. Right. I don't, and this is what I would say, Mike, and this is what I'd say, and I don't want to get into this because this may be personal with me, but I don't see them doing anything with it. How they do it is they put it into a bill or do it into a law or do it in something in Congress, not hold a sign, not do this. You know, they're in positions, that group is in positions to do something about it, and they're not, you know. And I'm sorry if I'm frustrated, sorry I get into political, I don't mean to do that, so I apologize. But there are Christians out there that we need to talk to, all right? And that's what we can affect, all right? We can affect us talking to people that have fallen away from God, and no matter what happens here, it's going to happen, all right? It's going to happen. Whatever happens is going to happen, whether we go back to what we would say is normal, right, or whether we go extremely on the other side, it's going to happen. But in this lifetime, not the next. And that's what's important, right? Is where do we go from here? Heaven or hell? It's only two locations, right? So saying all that about politics, none of us are in a position to make it change. All we can do is vote, right? But what we can do is make a change for the life after this, right? That's the impact that we can do, is talk to your friends, talk to your families that used to say, I went to church, used to say, I love Jesus. They might still say they're a Christian, that's why we're talking to them, right? But they're not participating. That is where we can make a change, all right? Get them back in communion with God. So, all right. With all that said, let's rock it out. Do whatever you want.